Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Hot Mic Podcast. The Hot Mic Podcast is where divergent points of view debate and discuss hot topics. I'm Nate the Barbarian, your humble host. And as always, I am not alone. In fact, we got a new face with us today. We got Evan Holt with us today. How you doing, Evan?
Doing pretty well. How you feeling?
Hey, good to see you. Doing well, man. Doing well. Got Phil Heimlich. Uncle Phil. How
Well,
you doing, Uncle Phil?
well, I just want to
Good.
welcome Evan. Evan, we've needed some new thinking on this show for a long time. I just hope you. The only rule I say is just agree with me. Everything will be fine.
He means that too. And of course,
I'm sure it
Kevin
does.
Aldridge, aka the voice of reason. How you doing, sir?
Good, man. Happy Friday. And it's good to know that we got the Fresh Prince of Bel Air's Uncle Phil on the show. Just, lightened up a little bit. He must have been indoors all winter, but,
And as always, if you want to join us, I'll put a link on Facebook and YouTube. If you hit that link, you can join via video or audio. I'll send you a message when you're backstage, and we'll bring you on when we find space to do so. Please lift us up with a like and a share. And with that, let's just jump straight into it. You know how we do. It's a Friday. People got things to do. So let's get straight into it. There's a very interesting local story I want to bring to your attention since we are a Cincinnati-based podcast. That's Councilman Scotty Johnson, who's a former member of the Cincinnati Police Force, now retired. And there was recently a joint meeting between Cincinnati Public Schools and also City Council. Among other things, they talked about safety at youth sports. If you've ever attended a youth sports event, you may have seen some things that have happened that made you feel unsafe. There was at least one shooting. I think there was maybe two shootings, but at least one shooting that involved youth sports. So people are really talking about this. But something interesting came out. Scotty Johnson said, look, we need to stop betting on our children. In the article that I read, this on Cincinnati.com, he said that it's come to his attention that people are placing bets as high as $5,000
Oh,
on Pee Wee football, right? What
is
going
anybody
on?
here? Question: is anybody betting against their kid? Now that might be a good idea.
I'm not sure, but many people are saying this is just going too far. And let me put this up. Here is a list of recommended youth football rules in terms of rentals. There's a lot of question marks about what needs to be done to make these events safer. Some are suggesting that we need to make sure that we have Cincinnati police officers there, among other things. I might come back to this. Cincinnati Police Union President Ken Kobler said that the violence at elementary school events has revolved around gambling for years. Quote, you wonder why these kids are so violent. It's because their parents perpetuate it. It's time for adults actually to act like adults. He said police can't be present to prevent violence, but the leagues he said police can be present to prevent violence, but the leagues don't always have the money to afford extra security. So my question is, what is the solution to this problem? Is this a problem, number one? Is it properly being diagnosed? And if so, what is the solution to it? I throw it to the crew. Anybody can jump in.
Yeah, well, I think I would say first that, man, even Pete Rose is probably rolling over in his grave on this. I mean, betting on Pee Wee football games, man. I had a friend, Nathan, whose son played Little League football, and he invited me to their Super Bowl. This was maybe about a year ago. And I don't go to this type of stuff because I don't have kids. So I don't go to the young sporting events, but he invited me and I went. And I was just shocked, man, at the behavior of the adults who were there. Like, these are little kids who are like learning how to play football, man. And these parents in the stands, they are tripping. They're on the coaches about the play calls and all of this stuff. And I'm just like it's the NFL, bro. And I'm just sitting here looking at this like, are you serious? And they were dead serious. Like they were not playing. And so I kind of got a laugh out of it at first, but then as I thought about it and you see stories like these, it's like the solution is the parents got to recognize that they're ruining it for their children. That's where it starts. I mean, I don't necessarily like the way Ken Kober said it, but I think at its heart, what he's saying is true. Like, all of this stuff starts with parenting and how the parents conduct themselves, in front of their children and how they treat it. And I get it. I was just talking to somebody yesterday. Sports has become a business. Now that you got NIL, Phil's favorite subject.
Yeah.
And even before that, like parents are starting at a very young age to think about their kids as a business. How can I get my child to be at the top level of athletes so that they can eventually cash in at some point down the line? And it's become less about kids having fun, enjoying and growing in the sport. And it's become about a lot more about some parents, not all parents, but some parents putting a great deal of pressure, on their kids because they're looking for the next LeBron James, or they're looking for the next, Shador Sanders, or whoever you want to name. And I think it really is taking the joy and the fun out of what should be a fun activity for kids. And the gambling is just one aspect of that. I mean, gambling has become such a part of the sports complex now. Whether it's fantasy football, whether it's FanDuel, whether it's, going to your local sports book to bet on games, sports and gambling has become synonymous. It used to be something that was frowned upon, but now it's something that has just become a part of every aspect of every sport that you watch. You can bet on anything now, on any sport. You can bet on whether the guy who's stepping up the free throw line is going to make the first or the second free throw. I mean, you can do all of these prop bets now. So we really got to take a look at that. But I think the easiest and the best solution is that it always starts with the parents.
For sure. I mean, the things you mentioned about the sports betting, John Oliver actually did a special a couple weeks ago about sports betting and how it's designed just like online mobile gaming to specifically attract addicts or people who have an inclination toward addiction. So with the immediate notifications they get for betting and things like that. And then now they bet on just obscure things all over the world. They can bet on like table tennis in Russia. And that actually was the most bet on game because they can get an immediate return on it and it'd be high stakes and things like that. I would think it's about so odd that we've normalized sports betting. It was historically always like illegal. So many people serve time over this, and now we've normalized it so much. Now there's like funding a lot of things that are around. I don't know. Did the story specify what the violence was between students or was it between the adults? I mean, I assumed it was the adults, but I don't know if the story had clarified. But yeah, there's always been an issue with the, parents like acting wild at, youth sports events. We've been joking about this in the media for years. I think it was like a South Park episode years ago that was talking about it where Randy Marsh is like making a scene, and yeah, it's always like, parents doing that because the culture really is very, very toxic. I kind of come as an outlier because I'm not really into sports or football or anything like that. Again, went to art school. I don't know anything about that. But I do find it to be incredibly toxic, and it has so much tribalism in it. That's like, so much my team, your team, you're the enemy, that kind of thing. And we ingrained it, so many of our cultures, even to our politics as well, which like why translates in that why people get so tribalist about their political views. Because it's someone's like, oh, my colors, your colors, and that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm curious about like what actual violent events happen. I really don't have a solution, but I see sports betting is a huge problem, not just on that think of you betting on children, but also like on a national stage. I don't think anybody's going to push back on it because folks are getting paid on it, but yeah, I'm curious though.
Phil, you want to jump in or you want me to go?
Well, I never knew about this. My kids, of course, are in college, so they're beyond that. But I had no idea this was happening. I have a couple questions, maybe you guys can answer it. One, if they're going to bet on their kids, why wouldn't they be more likely to bet at the junior high or the high school level? That's one question, because it's a little more well-known and organized. The other thing is, getting back to Evan's point, are they gambling? I'm assuming between themselves that they're not going to some professional betting place, because what professional betting
this
place
would have to
has
be like underground, not an official
kids'
capacity.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be just two fathers, I guess, at the game. Hey, I'll bet you
a gentleman's bet.
Huh? Yeah, exactly. And the other thing, and again, this is what Evan asked, is, okay, is the violence that we're talking about between the adults and the kids? I mean, frankly, if it's between the kids, then I'm not sure what the gambling has to do with it necessarily, unless the idea is that the parents putting so much pressure on the kids to win that somehow sparks violence. So those are my questions.
Yeah. Well, there was a incident that happened last year, and it was between two men. They got into an argument. It was at a pee wee football or a children's football game over at the Walnut Hill Stadium. And I think I'm looking at it now. Two people were hospitalized. So that's
Oh,
one of
man.
the incidents that's kind of sparking this. Um, yeah, I mean, gambling. I mean, listen, our government promotes gambling. We men and women have been gambling since the beginning of time. It's just a part of the human experience. I actually don't have a problem with, let's say you got two fathers from opposing teams and they have, as Evan put it, a gentleman's bet. I don't have a problem with that. And I don't think the gambling in and of itself is the issue. I think it comes back down to the lack of maturity and self-control of the adults. You know what I'm saying? You can gamble, but if you're gambling to the point where now you're trying to argue with the refs and you arguing and yelling at the players and causing a scene, you've taken it too far, right? If you've got a gentleman's bet and two of you are just sitting there talking amongst yourselves, nobody has to know about it. But you've got adults acting like children once again, and they let their emotions and their lack of maturity get the best of them, and they ruin the environment for everybody. My son is 10, so we got many more years. He plays baseball and basketball and might play flag football or some other stuff. And so, yeah, those are very toxic environments. In fact, I'll go so far to say it's a very dangerous environment when you're talking about adults and their children. That's a very dangerous environment because, I've dealt with it myself. You got some grown folks out there that get beside themselves. They get out of pocket and they start talking about other people's children. That can be very dangerous. That's something else that happens. I think the solution is for Cincinnati to finally put their money where their mouth is. We love to complain about the violence. We love to complain about primarily what black youth are doing wrong, but we don't want to put no money behind it.
Well, when
I'm
you say put money, what is it? You talking about more police? You talking about
I'm
social
talking about more
programs?
police. Here's the
Oh,
solution.
okay. I thought you were getting into the midnight basketball bit.
Well, you already know how I feel about that. Absolutely, yes. Midnight basketball, midnight flag football, whatever it
Well,
takes.
well, how's that going to help? They'll bet on that.
Well, that's a whole separate issue. We're talking about the
But you're
kids. I mean,
saying
having
changing
opportunities
sports
for
is going to
children.
change. I don't understand. You're saying what is the money you want to use for? If you're just saying changing
Well, let me
sports.
explain it to you. Let me get it out and explain it to you. You brought that up, but let me explain where I was going with it. So, the solution is real simple. Put your money where your mouth is. So, for instance, in my opinion, at every single youth event, I don't care if it's indoor and outdoor, you should not be able to enter that if you are not going past a metal detector. We have to realize where we are. We have to realize where we are. We're not 30, 40 years ago. You should never attend a youth event or any kind of sporting event, whether it's indoor, outdoor, I don't care what the grade is, without passing through a metal detector. That's number one. Number two, we not only need Cincinnati police officers at all of the events, and we need more than one. I would say at least 2 to 3. But we also need safety monitors who are working in concert with police, who can monitor the crowd, home and visitors, and kind of ascertain or determine if things are about to jump off, right? If things are about to jump off, the safety monitor calls police who are already on the scene, and police can either talk to them, maybe talk them down, and or escort them from the facilities. Police need to be visible at every single game. But what's the
Yeah.
issue?
Well,
Money, right? How do we pay for it? But here's why I say the hypocrisy. How do we have a conversation about this? And in any way, we are hesitant about paying for it. While at the same time, Hamilton County commissioners are asking the state for $350 million for
yeah.
a bingo stadium.
Yeah.
That don't make no
So,
sense. That makes no sense whatsoever. What are
yeah.
our priorities? Do we care about youth and these events being safety, or do
Yeah,
we
so
not?
I think Nathan, I think we got to be careful about blurring the lines between different things, and we can get into this whole conversation about comparing spending money on the Bengals versus spending money on the kids, and that's kind of a complex conversation that I don't know that we have time to get into. But
It's not complex.
I think it is. I think it is on a variety of different reasons. And again, I don't want to detract from the main point that we want to make here. Is I think that what you're saying is all well and good, but the reality of executing it is very much different. I mean, there are a lot of youth events and a lot of things that are going on across the entirety of the city. And so to suggest that, you know, you need to have a cop or a couple of cops or everything at every one of these events, I don't know, is just a realistic thing unless you're talking about really blowing up the police force. Because remember, the cops have other things to do, more serious crimes to take care of than policing.
Yeah, no, he's
Yeah.
talking about details though, Kevin. But usually the cops are pretty happy because they get paid very well, so it's not taking them from
again. But who pays? But who
protecting
pays
the
for that
community.
cost? Again, you're talking about literally dozens of sporting leagues and sporting events all across greater Cincinnati that are going to require police presence there, and not on overtime. Because you're right. That's the conversation that's here. Is most of these leagues pay for their security themselves. That's not anything that comes out of the taxpayers' dollar. They pay for that. They pay for the security that they have there. Someone who runs a professional sports league, we have to have security at our games. We pay for that. Nobody is bringing that to the table. So most of the time, when you are a private enterprise or business doing something, those are the costs of doing business. Again, we're getting away from. The question is should taxpayers be obligated to pay for parents who cannot control themselves? Like you're getting away from the main point. Should money that could be realistically spent in better places be spent millions of dollars or whatever, however much it is, to spend to police parents because they can't control themselves at a youth game? Come on, man.
We erroneously put cops.
Yeah, but it's not. But it's not taxpayer money.
I think that's what Nathan is talking about. Nathan is talking about the city providing this. That's what he said. The city should provide.
I'm talking about whomever. I mean,
yeah,
primarily,
I don't think he was limiting it to it. He was just saying that we need cops at these games without discussing who's paying for it.
Well, I think who pays for it matters. If you're saying that these organizations need to have more security there and they're going to pay for it, fine. But I think that's a different conversation than the taxpayer paying for it. Nathan specifically said this is where the city needs to put its money where its mouth is. So when he said the city, was he talking about the city of Cincinnati, or was he talking about more broadly all of us in Cincinnati?
I think I said we. I think I said we and not city, but you can add the city to it, whoever. Either we believe in the safety and the promotion of youth sports, or we don't.
I mean, we put erroneous amounts of cops out downtown on Friday and Saturday nights all the time just for the illusion of safety all the time. Like, and the case with actually putting them in places with schools with their children, that would be prioritizing safety. Like, obviously I have like my issues with, broadly, policing and locally and nationally, but that money's already allocated. That's like 30-40% of our city's budgets. That money's already allocated. They're getting paid regardless. So it's about where you delegate those resources. I think most people prefer having cops at youth events, making sure people are safe, than erroneously patrolling streets or sleeping in their cars. Like, I think rather than be doing something than nothing, and again, if they're city employees, like, we should be dictating what they're doing. We should be dictating their broader agenda. So we're saying, hey, we need y'all over here. Y'all should be over there. I mean, just in my opinion, that's my point of view in terms of like what I'm saying, like put your money where the mouth is. Like, where are you delegating police to? Are you having them over policing, neighborhoods erroneously, or are you having them doing things that actually serve in the interest of public safety, which is being present in places where children could be at risk of violence or adults at risk of violence because of these sports games? So.
Yeah, and going back to the county, like I said, the county is asking the state for $350 million for a football stadium for billionaires. Last time I checked, Cincinnati is inside of Hamilton County. So where is the money to beef up security for these youth sports
Where's the money
events?
for anything, really? I mean, you could be lobbying the state for tons of different things the city needs. And for that whoever, people having their connections to lobby on behalf of a billionaires to get more, taxpayer money is crazy to me. It's like you actually have an opportunity to, all right, we're going to ask the state for money for things that can actually help our city. So subsidize a billionaire. which studies have shown, like, investment in these, like, stadiums has never really broadly benefited the city whatsoever. We're nationally known for having the worst stadium deal ever. Why are we ever giving more money to Mike Brown without a proper return on that investment? And why are we asking the state for money to help that? Like, that's crazy to me. Why are you not asking the state for funds for affordable housing or public transit, things like that? It's really necessary.
Well, just to be clear, I know I'm getting into the weeds here a little bit, but the truth is, as far as the state money goes, there really isn't any state fund that could be used for basically what we call operating expenses, which would include the police and stuff like that. There's a capital fund. Now, you may say, well, I don't think it should go for the Bengals stadium. It should go for some other, but it's only limited to capital projects. That's why Stan Aronoff got a lot of money to build the theater named after him. But it isn't just like, oh, we can ask the state, instead of giving that money to the Bengals, give it to us for whatever issues we need.
I would never ask the state for money for police. So yeah, the police already have their money. It's already delegated from the budget. They can do with that whatever accordingly. I'm not ever kind of beef up that budget whatsoever. So yeah, we're in agreement that, like, the comparison wasn't quite accurate. But the same in terms of, again, where our priorities are, like, where our budget's, money's going, that to that point, like, Nathan's consistent, where it's like, yeah, what are we doing?
So let me look at this again. So how much does it cost, Kevin? I want to ask you this because I know you got experience. How much does it cost to get, let's say, 3 officers per hour to provide security for an event?
It really just kind of depends, and I don't want to say that this is how they do it for everything, because I don't know exactly what their overall costs are in terms of how they judge different events, or whether it's kind of a similar flat fee. But I know we didn't have 3, we only had 1 security. Our situation only required us to have 1 security guard at our games, and it's fortunately the environment at our games is not such where we have to have like 3 or 4 officers there. But it cost us about $500 a pop for that.
Per hour or per evening?
Yeah. So it was about $500 or $600, and most of our games were probably like 2.5 hours.
But Nathan, that list you're showing, that includes like paying the custodian, and I noticed it includes paying for the rental. It's a lot of other stuff.
Yeah. So the $500 an hour is nothing. That is nothing.
He's not even saying an hour. He's saying for the whole night.
Yeah, but this says totally for an hour, like the graphic in front of us.
Oh, that's all the other stuff.
Yeah, so if you look down there where it says,
but this more accurately pertains to the youth events. That's why I'm just using that $5.50 an hour. To me, that's nothing to provide a sense of peace and security for parents and for youth in Cincinnati, in Hamilton County, when they go to these youth football or youth sporting events. That's nothing.
Yeah, and they have to pay. Don't the kids or the families have to pay to get on those leagues, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a fee,
So
for uniforms and costs and things like that.
I know it's hard on parents. You increase the fees to make sure
but
everybody's safe.
Here's my point.
The city, county,
here's my point about why that's a problem, Phil. First of all, and I don't disagree with you. You can do that. But this is the problem that we always get into with youth sports and these pay-to-play models is you've got a lot of kids, primarily a lot of the kids that you're talking about, who need to be off the streets and have things to do, don't have the kind of money to pay the fees that one might charge a parent to be able to participate. So by raising the fees so much so that you can have these officers at the game, and I agree. I mean, again, to me, all of this goes back on the parents, and it's a shame that you've got a handful of them who don't know how to act, who, as a result of that, now we're having to look at having 3 or 4 officers here that we got to pay, that we got to raise fees, that now maybe some kids can't afford to be in it because a handful of fools don't know how to control themselves at the game. And this is why this kind of gets under my craw a little bit, is that, and getting back to this notion of personal responsibility, like the amount of money that we spend out because of people's inability to just be decent, right? Just be a decent human being. I ain't saying, like, again, if you want to have a little gentleman's bet on the game, do you? But to the point that you can't handle that you got to get violent, that is what I have. That's where I really have the problem. And I just have a problem that time and again, people are forced to pay, and sometimes pay an exorbitant amount for a handful of people who cannot control themselves. So that's where I'm looking at. That's where I'm looking at is how do you get at them? How do you get those people to pay the price and to pay the penalty that everybody else has to pay to control them or keep them out?
That's a broader sociological question.
Like, yeah, and well, it's definitely one that we need to tackle. See, I think these broader sociological issues, like it's easier to talk about cops, it's easier to talk about money than it is to talk about these real cultural, societal issues that need to be tackled and dealt with that are costing us so much money that we could really be using to do other things. And you can shake your head, Nathan, but you're going to be talking about this 50 years from now.
Well,
you're going to be talking about this 50 years from now because people in the chat, yeah, we've been dealing with this for 30 years. The fact that we've been dealing with this type of nonsense for 30 years and it says everything in itself about our inability to want to address these larger societal issues.
When they get in, if two adults get into a fight at one of these games, I would hope, in terms of deterrence, if there's a cop there, that they would not just, break it up. That if they start throwing punches, put the cuffs on and let them go through the whole process, because that is what we call deterrence. Now, again, I don't know how tough they're enforcing this, and it could be, we don't want to offend parents or something. But I think if people start engaging in physical violence, hey, they got to get they need to be held accountable. They need to be locked up for a day or two, whatever it is, because I'll tell you this much, that is going to send a message to other people that would act the way you're talking about.
Right. It would. And that's my point. We need to have the funding to have police, and I'll call them safety monitors, right? And also metal detectors.
Are people, right? Adults who are going to these schools for these games not obligated to go through the same metal detectors the students are obligated to go through during the day? Like, is that not a thing?
Well, if you go to a basketball game like at Taft High School or any of those other schools, if I recall, everybody goes through a detector. But we're talking about situations where it's like outdoors, like a football game, right?
I'm talking. Look, my son has played basketball in his school's league for the last few years. We've never gone through a metal detector. What I am suggesting is we need to understand where we are now. And we need to give up looking back at the good old days when everything was so safe. We don't live there anymore. We have to deal with the reality of the circumstances that we are in, and we need to prepare for that and put more money into prevention. So I hear what you're saying, Kevin, but that's like going to a Bengals game. Like, part of the price of the ticket is to help them pay for security. So they have a security force there, right? That don't stop people from going to the games. They're being proactive. They're thinking ahead. And it's the ticket holders that pay for that. It should be no different when we're talking about our youth here. It should be no different. It's the same basic concept. Let's be preventative, right? Let's put up a deterrent to prevent and dissuade it from happening so we don't have a problem before there really is a problem. And I'm just saying our babies are just as valuable as Jamar Chase is.
Right.
In fact, they're more valuable to me. And it's just a change in the way we look at things, in my opinion.
And I don't disagree with any of what you said, but again, it goes back to the dollars and cents of it. The Bengals can do all of that because the Bengals are they're a $1 billion operation. These youth leagues are not. And you're not going to charge a parent $25 a ticket to get into a youth game because they're not going to pay it. So I'm saying there comes a point of diminishing return in what you're talking about doing. You're either talking about jacking up participation fees to such a point, if the organizations are going to pay for it, you're talking about jacking up participation fees to such a point where you're going to weed out a bunch of kids. Or you're talking about if you're doing it like the Bengals model, the ticket payer pays for this, then you're talking about raising ticket prices to a level where affordability becomes a problem. I don't know how much it costs to get into some of these youth things, but I can imagine if you're trying to bake all of that into a ticket or a participation cost, that is going to raise the cost. And if the idea is to create these programs so that kids can participate, that becomes a much more difficult thing to do if you're talking about passing along the cost to the customers or the participants.
Well, listen, don't we pass along the profits? Hamilton County taxpayers subsidize the Bengals, and we enable them to pass along more profits. So if we can subsidize as a county the profitability of billionaires, then we need to subsidize as a county the safety of our youth. Period. It blows my mind that more people don't look at it that way. Hamilton County taxpayers help the Bengals make money. So Hamilton County taxpayers need to help these sports events for youth be safer. We doing it for Jamar Chase. We doing it for T. Higgins. We're paying for that. So pay for our babies. But let me add this for this is Ken Kober who ticked me off. You already know I'm still mad at TikTok. The nerve of this man. So this man says, quote, "You wonder why these kids are violent. It's because their parents perpetuate it. It's time that adults act like adults." Now you know where I'm going with it, Phil, and you might like this. He didn't talk this tough about Donald Trump when he released all those people that beat up the Capitol Police.
Oh, no question.
It was Millie mouthing and yabba dabba and yeah, it's bad, but we're just gonna have to wait and see. But now you want to get tough and talk about how it's a bad example that perpetuates violence. You didn't say that about Donald Trump.
And they didn't, all this stuff about, we want to stand up for the police, which I believe in 100%, but not the 150 guys that got attacked or beaten up on January 6th. No, somehow they are not. I do not understand, and we're off the subject, but I don't understand how any police union in the country could endorse a man who incited that kind of violence on police officers, and he said he was going to pardon him, and knowing they're going to pardon him. I'd love to question every single, and I was always supported strongly by the FOP, but I'd love to question every single FOP president I could. How? Because they all endorsed Trump. How can you
don't want to ask me about cops, so
go ahead, Evan, man. Go ahead. This is your stage, man. This is why we brought you on.
So the entire institution, police apparatus, has always been rooted in racism, quite frankly. So even, overwhelming majority of officers are white men, overwhelming majority, and so, they're willing to sacrifice a few of them,
In which areas?
Nationally speaking, not speaking like city locally, but nationally speaking.
Well, okay, I'm not sure.
It's broadly very relevant because the whole roots of the history of policing have its roots in slave patrol. Like that was the start of modern policing. So it hasn't changed substantially since then. The apparatus still changes the rules here and there, but what they do is overwhelmingly targeting non-white people and poor people for petty offenses. So obviously they were pro-Trump because he was letting the leash off. He's letting them do whatever they want. Oh yeah, support our police, bust their heads, all that kind of stuff. So they're lockstep with that, And the police overwhelmingly don't operate like an actual union. They're a fraternity, which is why they protect bad apples. Any other union you're a part of, if you were caught doing something illegal or messed up while you're on for the job itself, they get you out of there immediately. But unlike that, with police, they mobilize quickly to protect bad apples. So they're not even like a proper union. They're class traders, and I don't really, I have issues. I understand the role that they should play, but it's broadly exploited. And now the police are overwhelmingly the largest gang ever. So it's not surprising that people with that kind of mentality would align with someone like Trump because their values broadly align. Like I read even like locally. So I read there was an anonymous survey they did of CPD officers locally a few years back, and the responses were very, very telling in terms of how police officers view Cincinnatians. And they never really said race, never said blacks, blah blah. But obviously we're talking about framing us as animals, and they do view us that way. A lot of police officers locally don't even live in the city, so they view us as animals that need to be like caged and things like that. They're very dehumanizing. They have that mentality, so it's not even just a national issue as much as like targeting local issue. Like police are not like. I wish it was this romanticized idea of how we see police on TV and things like that, but it's not that. And again, I'm not saying every single police officer is the objective, awful person, but what they pledge allegiance to, the institution, what they're doing, so it's like, okay, I might be one of the bad apples. I'm gonna turn a blind eye to that bad apple. And if I do report that bad apple, I'm gonna get outed. So they all protect each other broadly. So even if you're not one individual bad apple isn't guilty, the other ones are who support them are. So I do have a lot of issues with policing, the way it should be approached, broadly. But So yeah, it's not surprising that they would support Donald Trump at all. Even if they did kill a couple of officers, they would view them as, well, they were class traitors. They were on the other side. They deserve what they got. And there's always been a broader hypocrisy with the whole thin blue line kind of situation, anyways. But overwhelmingly, like white supremacists, like conservative viewpoints are rooted in hypocrisy. Anyway, I could talk for 2 straight hours about that. So don't we start it, whatever. But it's just not surprising. But you brought Trump and policing, so that's where we are.
So when I opened my comments, I said I had an issue with what Ken Kober said too, for a lot of the same reasons that Nathan did. But to be fair to Ken, I will say that he did have something to say about Donald Trump and his frustration with the freeing of the January 6th rioters. So in fairness and in accuracy, he was critical. But to Nathan's point, he did not say it with his chest like he said that statement that he made about the parents. So that's the big delineator. That is,
and he endorsed the guy knowing that he had incited.
Hey, look, man, we can have this conversation about all the people who knew better and knew what Trump was going to do and voted for him anyway. We have that conversation on every podcast. So that goes without saying. The police unions are no different. Anybody who voted for Donald Trump, you knew what you were getting. The man, it wasn't like the man was out there false advertising saying he was healthy for you, while on the meantime he had a whole bunch of ingredients that killed you. He let you know exactly what was in the recipe, the ingredients that was in the packaging, and people bought it anyway. So now if you choking on it, you got what you paid for, essentially.
I'm personally not in that camp of doing a victory lap of ha 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 Trumpers, that's what you get, blah blah. I don't really believe in that, because I know it's not right to call someone stupid or uneducated, but a lot of his supporters are uneducated, and a lot of them are.
Yeah, I can tell you a lot of his supporters are highly educated.
Arguably.
I can tell you, I can tell you 4 or 5 friends of mine that one went to Harvard, the other went where else, and they're highly successful and educated, and one of them made the comment that, and this is this is a person who reads is informed. Trump is the best president since Reagan. Now, those of you who don't like Reagan that many, but you get the point. I mean, they think this guy. They either support him, vote for him because, quote, they like his policies, which to me is ridiculous, or they just plain think the guy's great. And so, I'm not disagreeing with you, but it isn't just people who are uninformed and ignorant. Right. There's a group.
I wasn't saying it's all. I wasn't saying it's all of them that voted for Trump. I'm saying the demographic of them, working class, working poor, rural white folks who just thought, they just believed naively, that he had their best interests at heart, and they had no other options. What else? I'll have my vote. I'm past just broadly lumping in all Trump voters. Obviously, I'm gonna have a lot of issues with most of them. But I'm not taking a victory lap of ha, you got what you deserve, whatever, because I don't delight in anyone's suffering. Even they're my political opposition, I don't delight in their struggle and their suffering at all. It doesn't, make me happy whatsoever, But yeah, it's unfortunate a lot of people were.
I guess it's a question of where you put your compassion. I'll put my compassion. I'll put my compassion on the 20 million people around the world that no longer have drugs that will save their life, vaccine, who are deprived of emergency food. I'll put my sympathies or compassion there. And also all those government people being laid off, just like that. Their whole life's work on, they got no job. Now, again, some of them voted for Trump, and I won't, I don't have too much compassion on them, truthfully. But the others, many of whom may not have, I feel very sorry that they're being.
To me, it's not a matter of I hear you on the compassion. My statement wasn't a victory lap or anything. It was facts. I spoke facts. If you voted for Donald Trump, you got what you voted for. That's not a lack of compassion. That's facts. And
he does keep his promises.
It's biblical. We reap what we sow. The consequences of the decisions that we make. So if the decision that I made was to elect a guy who eliminated my job, that is a consequence of my decision. I'm not happy you lost your job. I'm just spitting facts that the dude you voted for is the reason why you ain't working no more. And so do with that what you will. You know, I'm just speaking facts, and that's all I said. That's all I said.
No,
Like,
I wasn't disagreeing with you, and I wasn't
Trump,
disagreeing with you. What I was saying was like a add-on to what you were saying. I wasn't disagreeing with what you were saying at all.
Yeah. I mean, you know,
I
everybody.
just see too many liberals like, ha 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 ha. That's what you get. Like, I just don't, adhere to that.
Yeah, I mean, Ken Colbert, to that point, getting back to Ken Colbert, is Trump told you what he was going to do with the January 6th people before he voted. Y'all chose to endorse him. So coming back even after the fact, as mealy-mouthed as it was, doesn't do much for me because you knew what he was going to do. So you should have been vocal during the campaign and demanding that Trump retract that. If that was going to be your guy and you were going to give him your endorsement as a police union, then you needed to stand up with your back and say it with your chest, just like you said to these. Because I don't disagree with the overall message that Ken Colbert had there. I just don't like that he said it, and I don't like how he said it. I mean, I agree that, sometimes kids emulate what they see their parents doing. And there is no disputing. It is just some facts that you have some fools that show up and act a fool. That's been part of this conversation. So I'm not going to pretend like that's untrue just because Ken Colbert said it. But I like Nathan's point. It's easier for you to come at what you perceive to be black kids and their parents than it is to come at Donald Trump, for all of the reasons why we know that pretty much everybody, and we'll probably get into this into another segment, why everybody who tends to traffic on that side of the aisle is afraid of that man. They're afraid of retaliation and retribution. And either that or you get down with what he's talking about. Like, most people on that side fall into one or two camps. You get down with what he's talking about, or you don't really get down with it, but you're scared to say something because you don't want him sending the MAGA mob after you. And that's pretty much what it amounts to.
Yeah. But, as I look at Ken Colbert's comment, and then we'll move on, unless this provokes some more conversation. But he does say something that kind of rubs me the wrong way. I mean, this is hot mic, so I might as well go ahead and put it out there. So let me read it again. You wonder why these kids are violent. It's because their parents perpetuate it. And that kind of coming from a white male, Ken Colbert, and then he's making his excuses and not really standing on business and saying it with his chest with Trump. It just feels like further the criminalization of black people. I would change that and say that our culture is violent, right? We live in a very violent culture, right? Whether they're black, white, or whoever. And there are some situations in which, parents don't perpetuate it, but kids pick up on it, right? That does happen. But there are some scenarios, many scenarios perhaps, where parents are perpetuating. I just felt like, I don't know, it's just something about this kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
I mean, it's that hypocrisy that's like,
and it could be because of Colbert, but that's just how.
Honestly, I don't even know who that guy is, and I kind of just assume he's a white guy because white dudes say things like
he's
that.
The police union.
Whenever there's like a youth, black youth has done something criminal, so the parents, blah blah. But they don't have that same energy with a mass shooter. Never asking, it starts in the home, like what culture they involved in, that kind of thing. They don't really play that game. It's always overwhelmingly targeted, like non-white, juveniles. Whenever that question comes up, So it was amazing,
Hey, bro, and one example is what happened down in Florida. Now, by all accounts, it looks like the shooter is the son of a sheriff's deputy. By all accounts, it looks like he was caught up with Charlie Kirk and Turning Point America, and he's anti-multicultural, right? I'm not saying he's a Trumpster, but that's what's coming out now looks like. And I don't hear anybody talking about his father.
I'm sorry, is this the Carmelo Anthony? Is this another one?
No, it's another situation that happened down in Florida. Florida State, yeah.
Oh, the Florida State shooting.
Yeah, I was just bringing that,
like
connecting
traffic
that to
accidents. We normalize it so much. Oh yeah, that one or the one that happened a couple hours later. Like there was like a press conference about school shooting and got interrupted about news about a new school shooting. We normalize it so aggressively in this country. Yeah. I forgot. I lost count. Yeah. But the number one domestic terrorist threat is a radical right-wing white male domestic terrorist. It always has been. It has never changed meaningfully.
Well, you're talking about the white supremacists, which I agree with. But
I'm saying that's the number one domestic terrorist threat, the one most likely to commit a mass shooting.
Yeah, according to Christopher Wray, who was the last FBI director, said that. So he said it was those Proud Boy type groups that he said they were.
Yeah, and it's true. But then culturally, we don't like frame it that way ever. even though like they're the ones who are being groomed. Like the right loves to talk about grooming in terms of like LGBT culture and things like that, but about grooming kids. But right wingers the most grooming their kids, teach them how to shoot at a young age. You can say it's self-defense, but also it's a component of grooming, you know, in terms of like shaping their worldviews of who to demonize, who to fearmonger about, you know. Like you know, like again, like with Kyle Rittenhouse, like you know, that was maybe one of the first cases that maybe someone asked, "Oh, what was going on in that household?" You know, yeah, because you mentioned that. Yeah, what was going on in that household to cause someone to be that way? That was someone who was groomed culturally, you know, to be what they are. So yeah, they're the number one threat, but we never like talk about it that way, and we act surprised every single time it happens. Yeah. Anyway, going into the next topic there.
Yeah. Hey, before we
Yeah, I'm glad you
transition
did.
there, no,
Great
Nathan, I
segue.
did want to just piggyback on you and Evan's point, and I think you guys were very astute in sort of dissecting what made you uncomfortable about Kober's statement, because I do think, and I have no way of getting in the man's head, so I have to say that, but I think when he made that statement, like he was very much specifically, I believe, talking about Black kids and Black parents. I have no way of proving that, but that's the way that it comes across.
That's how dog whistles work.
Yeah, like when I talk about people acting a fool, like that's colorless, right? Like we see this across. There are fools of every color, stripe, background, or whatever. People who just don't know how to act. Those are not necessarily just Black people. And so I think when he makes that statement, and again, this is why you can say it with your chest. And I think most people who read that assume that it was the same way. And it falls into this category, even of the way that Trump and MAGA talk about, immigrants who are in this country, as they talk about them as animals and these super violent people that, it's that dog whistle that is intended not to make you think about white people when you talk about this, but you're thinking about a specific skin tone and color of person. And so that's why Ken Kober can come out and say that, because who are the majority of people who were arrested in January 6th? What skin tone did they have? Not saying that there weren't people of color mixed into that, but most of the people who were facing charges were white folks. And so, you can be a little more mealy mouthed about that than you can. I have no reason to disbelieve at all that if the January 6th protesters had been all Black or Hispanic or whatever, that Ken Kober would have had much stronger statements. If, let's just say, if Barack Obama or if Kamala Harris had been elected and had done the same thing that Donald Trump did, there is no way in hell he would have been as mealy mouthed in his response to that as he was. So I think that is exactly what makes you uncomfortable. It's not just the fact that he's a white guy who said it. It's about who you knew he was talking about specifically when he made that statement. And that's why it rubbed me the wrong way. Yeah. Like I can all be for and say that, yeah, it's likely that if you're a parent that's off the chain, doesn't necessarily guarantee that your kid is going to follow in that same path, but there's a decent chance that the apple don't fall far from the tree. So that's not such a radical statement. But I think who he was directing it at and how he was directing it was very specific, and that's why he was able to attack it the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you definitely brought some words to my thoughts. Absolutely. I think that you're hitting on how I was feeling. You articulated it. So yeah, we got to get Ken Kober on the show. I said I'd reach out to him. I just have not, to bring him on, and he can speak for himself. But, we made a segue to the Carmelo Anthony case, but, Kyle Rittenhouse weighed in on social media on the Carmelo Anthony situation. If you don't know, I'll break it down, both situations, just real quickly in a second. But he wrote, quote, "So the left thinks that Carmelo Anthony did what he did was self-defense, but what I did wasn't." And once again, the right and or conservatives, they revel in, sticking it to the libs. And this is really, really big in conservative culture. But just for folks who might have forgotten, Kyle Rittenhouse got national attention back in 2020, August of 2020, for fatally shooting two men, or he shot three men and killed two of them in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I believe it was following protests of a police shooting of a man named Jacob Blake. And he was exonerated, as I understand it, found not guilty on those charges. Now, Carmelo Anthony, that's a more recent case. And that happened, when was it? I think it was just, let me bring my notes up here. Here it is. Yeah, so Carmelo Anthony, 17 years old. He's out on bond right now. He had been in jail since being arrested back on April 2nd for allegedly stabbing another 17-year-old named Austin Metcalf. They were at a track meet. So kind of keeping in line with what we were talking about, a youth sports event. And as the story goes, as of right now, it looks like Austin Metcalf approached Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo Anthony is black. Austin Metcalf is not black. He is white. And he approached him. They got into a verbal back and forth. Apparently, there were some threats made by Austin Metcalf to Carmelo Anthony. At some point, Carmelo Anthony pulls out a knife and he stabbed Austin Metcalf in the chest one time, and Austin Metcalf is no longer with us. That young man, Carmelo Anthony, has since put on bond, and his family has talked about all of the things they're dealing with right now. But that's the situation. So taking it all the way back, does Kyle Rittenhouse have a point?
No.
Is he right?
Why is anyone even asking Kyle Rittenhouse's thoughts on literally anything? Like, why? Like, why are we giving this dipshit any attention whatsoever? Like, I don't get it. Like,
well, good question. Is the left? I mean, he's saying that the left is sort of standing up for this Anthony
Correct.
guy. Is that true? Is that
That
true?
is correct. Yeah.
Who are we talking about? What
Yeah,
are they saying? What's their
That's
point?
correct. That is correct. Yes, the way you put
Who
it.
are we talking about that's saying this, and what is their justification?
Just in
supporting
general,
a guy who stabs somebody.
Yeah. So basically, this is broken down to a race on some levels, but perhaps political persuasion as well. But there's a lot of feeling, at least online, of people supporting Carmelo Anthony, saying that this was clearly self-defense. And then you've got a lot of people on the other side, primarily white people and people that skew to the conservative side, saying, no, this is murder. He needs to be held accountable. And so because the situation is kind of similar, Kyle Rittenhouse decided to put it out there. Like I said, everybody's trying to be a star on the conservative side of things, and probably on all sides of things. So this is kind of like red meat for the conservatives online, and he put it out there. And a lot of people said that he had committed murder, but he was found that it was self-defense. So
yeah,
those are the
well, they're not really
there.
similar. They're not really similar situations at all. I mean, if you want to get down to any similarities, it's the race factor. You know, where in one situation you've got a young white kid with a gun who shot somebody black at a protest, and then you've got at a track game a black kid who stabbed, to death another white kid. So the racial element is probably the only sense of similarity that's there. Let's not forget, Kyle Rittenhouse drove,
well, he didn't drive. His mom drove him.
Or his mom drove him and dropped him off into a situation that he could have kept his butt at home. And, people would probably be alive. And
did the people he shot, did they have guns?
I can't remember whether they had. It's been so long ago, I forget the details of it. But basically, he's out there with his shotgun trying to protect the streets of a city that he doesn't even live in or has no business even being there, really, other than to stir up and cause problems. And that's exactly what he got. He got the problems that he was looking for, and as a result of it, somebody was dead. So in this case, Kyle Rittenhouse went looking for the fight. In this case, from what I've read from the details, I don't think Carmelo Anthony actually went into this situation looking to confront anything. Now, there was some.
Well, what's he doing carrying a knife around?
Hey, look, again, you just don't know
Protection.
what situations or what things that had transpired, and that's why I'm trying to reserve judgment on it, because all of the details are not out. Like, these are things that will come forth, I'm sure, in an investigation and in a trial. And so I think for anybody to jump to any conclusions at this point, it's always premature, especially when you don't know all of the facts and all of the details. How can you have a strong opinion when you don't have all of the information? Like, that's one of the things that just always kind of maddens me about some of these conversations is everybody's quick to jump in on one side or the other on the debate. And what happens in our culture now is that once you've chosen a side, then regardless of what information and facts come out, people are dug in. And now they don't even want to cede any ground. Even if facts come out that dispute where they are, they'll make an excuse for it. And so,
Like the guy in El
it's
Salvador.
It's like,
is a
let's
good
just
example.
chill. At this point, there's a lot that we still don't know. Let's find out some information so that we can have an informed opinion about whether this was actually self-defense or, whether he actually did commit murder. And for me right now, there's still too many questions that I have that I don't have answers to be able to say definitively that this was self-defense or whether it was murder one way or the other. And if you look at the way even Carmelo Anthony's parents are handling the situation, that sure, they're standing by their son, but even they have been somewhat reserved in their commentary on it. I understand that's probably for legal reasons, so forth and so on. But hey man, there's still a lot more information out there, but there's no comparison. Rittenhouse need to keep his mouth shut. He need to be glad that he's free and not sitting in a jail somewhere. And I agree with Evan. Who gives a rip anyway? What Kyle Rittenhouse has to say? That's just more right wing, trying to stir up and keep the race stuff going. And really, that's all that this is even promoting him or giving him a platform to speak or paying him any attention. That's all that's designed to do is just stir up racial animus. And he need to sit his tail down somewhere like he should have before he got himself in the situation he got himself in.
Preach.
Sustained. Here is a quick video. I won't play all of it, but this is Carmelo Anthony's family. His mother held a press conference. The interesting thing about this is that the father of the deceased, he actually showed up uninvited, and things got a little bit tense, as you can imagine. But check this out.
I thought he said he forgave him.
Our children are loved, nurtured, and supported every step of the way. In wake of this tragic incident, our family has been under attack. Whatever you think what happened between Carmelo and the Metcalf boys, my 3 younger children, my husband, and I didn't do anything to deserve to be threatened, harassed, and lied.
So yeah, just wanted to play a second of that because this is just a peek into their lives. As you can imagine, people are vicious, period. But when something like this happens, people are on another level, and I can only imagine through. And they've been doxxed, so where they live is out there, and people are showing up at the house. And it's just a tragic circumstance to where we live at right now. And I like what you said, Kevin. I agree with almost everything you said, especially about Kyle Rittenhouse. Although you can make an argument that it was self-defense, if I'm just going to be honest with you, even though I agree with everything you said, we all know it. He was in search of a problem and he found it. He shot 3 non-black people. They were all white or they were non-black. And at some point, a man put a gun on him. So it gets real. Yeah, it gets real murky.
Well, allegedly, he was waving the gun and pointing it at protesters.
That's
which
true.
is why one guy ran up and hit him with a skateboard and tried to peace out, and ended up getting shot.
Right.
It's a self-defense in the way that you went and shoved some guy and then guy hopped back like that and you shot him. It's he was going to hit you, but would that have started if you didn't initiate that initial engagement kind of thing?
Well, if you're interested, I'll tell you what the elements how self-defense works, at least in Ohio, and I assume nationally. Self-defense is what they call an affirmative defense, okay, just like alibi is. And what that means is it isn't just enough. Well, basically, the burden to prove self-defense is on the defendant, okay? Now, the defendant does not have to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. But in other words, just so you know, the way it works is that the prosecution has to leave out the self-defense. They have to prove the various elements, okay, like on a murder charge or whatever. And then the defense, if they're pleading, they actually have to notify it's a plea. If they're pleading self-defense, then they have to actually prove, the burden's on them to prove that certain elements of self-defense are met. And it's been a while, but I think it's basically that your life was in danger. And there's also one that we're about the level of defense has to be commensurate with what the threat was. But
does it really, in light of recent stand your ground laws? Has not thrown that kind of out the window, or
okay.
Sorry to cut you off. Apologies.
Okay. Well, stand your ground. I think stand your ground. I think is more your residence, but I could be
not
wrong
Ohio.
about
It's
that.
everywhere you go.
But Okay. Well, let's put it this way. That could change. Okay. But the self-defense law is what I suggested.
Sorry, I'm
But
going to cut you off, but
anyway,
like, yeah, you should be able to be in theory, like you were,
yeah,
in mortal danger situation, but I feel like,
yeah.
we see how the law is interpreted, where it's like, yeah, it's technically the law, but it's open to interpretation, and overwhelmingly it's skewing in a way where it doesn't benefit, certain demographics versus other ones who are allowed to claim self-defense.
Well, I think it's going to be hard for this, just from what I've read, and from what I've read about this Anthony case, it sounds like whatever threat he was under, the threat was nowhere close to his life being at risk. And I'm just guessing he's going to have a tough burden to
I
make
don't
that
know.
defense.
What I take many things, but one thing I'll share right now before we move on to the next subject is the one thing I take from the Carmelo Anthony situation, very, very tragic. I wish that the young man was still here. It looks like he had a career, and who knows what he could have brought to our society. And so we've been robbed. We've lost that. Not to speak of what his family is going through. I've got a son. I can't imagine that happening to my son. I'm just over with. But what I take from this is, and this is not this particular situation that is bringing me to this conclusion, but in today's world, you know, if you're going to get into a physical confrontation with someone, you have to be willing to take it all the way there, because you don't know what the other person has or doesn't has. In the world we live in, it ain't like in the 50s and 60s. My uncle used to tell me stories about how he used to get into fist fights and he had a pistol in his pocket, but he never pulled it because another guy never pulled it, right? Them days over with. Though that's the good old days. It's not coming back. In today's world, if you get to point where you're going to put your hands on another human being, buddy, you better be willing to take it all the way there, because they just might. And just because you punching them or kicking them, it don't matter. If they got a blade on you, they're going to cut you. If they got a gun on you, they're going to burn you. And that's just where we are. So my advice would be, leave people the heck alone. Treat people with kindness and respect. And if a confrontation comes up, my personal things, I'm walking away. I'm trying to run away. I don't want no smoke with nobody, because I know what I'm willing to do.
Right.
Right.
That is such wise advice, Nathan. And I thought about that as I was reading some of the dialogue that took place between the two young men. And it was when Carmelo Anthony, I think, made a statement to him where he said, put your hands on me and see what I'm going to do. Now, that right there is a warning for you know what. Like, it ain't different. Like you said, back in the day, you might be able to get that off like when we were kids on the playground and, you wasn't going to do nothing but push each other and shove and wrestle. And that was going to be the extent. Nobody was going to pull out, a gun or a knife in that type of situation. But as you said, we do not live in those times anymore. And the fist fight ain't necessarily how these young kids do it these days. And not even just the young kids, but even the older people. To what you say, like, there are situations that I come across every day. Somebody cut you off in traffic, do something. You think about saying something, but then you like, man, people are crazy these days, because you just don't know. You could say something to somebody. This happens. You could say something to somebody who cut you off in traffic, and the next thing you know, you dodging bullets down I-75. Man, it's like that these days. So, as you said, if you are not prepared to deal with the smoke, then you just need to keep your peace. And I think that in this situation, I'm sure that, if Mr. Metcalf were alive today, whatever they had going on, he would absolutely say it wasn't worth his life. And I'm sure Carmelo Anthony, looking back on it in retrospect, is, this action, the action that he took is, in all likelihood, not worth his freedom. I think they were arguing about him being under the wrong tent at a track meet. I mean, this is the tragedy, that goes back to what we were talking about a couple pods ago about what are fighting words. It's like for a person to lose their life over, I don't want you under my tent. Come on, man.
Allegedly, according to the family, like Carmelo been being bullied by the two brothers. There was an ongoing thing, which is probably like why they're alleging why he was carrying the knife, because he was concerned about getting Trump. Again, this is all conjecture,
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
that's what I had read, at least, you know. And again, that wouldn't, like, you know, inherently excuse it. You know, it could have been self-defense, but he's probably doing time. I mean, like, that's just not going to happen. He's probably doing some time. But I also understand why people want to come to his defense, because not trusting the official police statements and just knowing how broadly certain demographics are treated within the police justice system. You know, like, I understand being defensive. We're like, okay, give this person their chance in court and offer them all the grace the media offered Kyle Rittenhouse. You know what I mean? Like, you should be offering at least that much grace as they did him, you know.
I mean, the psychological scars of being bullied run very deep, very deep. It can change and alter your trajectory, right? Change your character, right? But there are people out there who have said enough is enough, and they would rather deal with the psychological effects of unaliving you and going through that process rather
They
than
continue
dealing
to
with
be
the
on
psychological effects of being bullied by you. And I'm here to tell you. So I treat people with respect and kind. You ain't gonna never see me going all there with it, right? With nobody. That's because I
like
want to give it
6'5".
and give respect. I want to give and give respect, but I also know, and I'll say it again, what I'm willing to do. And I ain't built like that or nothing like some of these cats out here living in some far worse conditions from me. So I can't imagine what they might be thinking. I just say leave people alone. Leave people alone, show love and respect and kindness, and keep it moving. Because if not, you're gonna fall into a situation like this over nothing. You know, you can't do that. You can't think somebody's smaller than you when you're gonna bully them. They're not going for it. It's just a whole new day.
Yep.
So, you know, heed this warning. And that goes for grown people too. Because I see a lot of grown people playing on Instagram and Facebook. Man, listen, somebody will walk up on you one day. It's just not worth it.
Right.
Just be cool with people, be nice, be pleasant, do what you tell your children. Be the same way with adults. And more than likely,
Like we are on this
except
show,
for this
except
show.
when you guys
And you're
pick
gonna
on
get
me.
that same, hopefully
You
you
know?
get that same
Exactly.
good energy back from people, and
Exactly.
you won't get caught up in some unfortunate situations. But let's move on. So I saw some great news this week. Great news. Not sure if the general public is aware of this, but something is happening, right? The Trump administration is getting a reaction, and I've been waiting to see and hoping and to see that people were going to respond positively. But we know that the colleges and universities, most notably Harvard, are under attack. Donald Trump wants to control academics, right? It's another authoritarian move. He can call it whatever he wants to call it, but that's what it is. Harvard's fighting back, but not just Harvard. There's something new. It's called the Big Ten Academic Alliance. So apparently there's about 18 universities who are part of what we call the Big Ten. Typically, we think of that as a sporting conference. This has nothing to do with sports. But you got 18 universities who are banding together saying, look, if Trump comes after one of us, he's got to deal with all of us. So they're doing things like pulling together resources for defense funds and other measures to protect themselves from the Trump regime. And here's just a list of some of those universities. Ohio State University, of course, we're in Cincinnati in Ohio. Just this list right here, you can read through it for yourself. But I think this is great news. I think we need more of this. I kind of look at this ironically enough because Trump is not a fan of NATO, but I kind of look at this as like a NATO type of alliance of these universities coming together saying we got to protect ourselves from Trump. Now, of course, in the real world, it's countries coming together saying we got to protect ourselves from the threat of Russia. But what do you think about this?
This is great. I mean, like, I've been looking for this kind of pushback and actual resistance from like actual Democrats for years. Like, well, not years, but like, this ongoing year. It's felt like years. And I think it's really showing that you see how quickly they about face to adhere to like, new Trump proposals in no time at all, without even taking a moment to push back. That's why when everyone did that, it was like clear case of like, oh, they wanted to do that anyway. They were looking for an excuse, So yeah, it's really dope that like these academics are coming together to do that. Like actual resistance, push back, say no, like be willing to, if you're not willing to go out and get arrested, fine, cool. But you should be willing to engage some other kind of like forms of civil, disobedience to push back onto agenda, not just roll over. Like that's what's been killing me this entire time. It's like y'all were warning, everyone's like, anti-Trump, it's the fascist going to come in. It's like, okay, all right, well, so what did you have a plan to respond to this? Like, are we just going to roll over and wait 4 years and hope that you get a new figurehead? So yeah, I'm incredibly grateful for these universities doing that. And I hope it inspire more people to say no and actually push back on the Trump agenda.
I would echo what Evan said. This is great to see. It's easy to target one place. It's easy to say that one place, this is just one place, but everybody else, is going along with what Trump is doing. No, we're starting to see this groundswell. And what happens when a snowball starts going downhill, other people start to develop courage as well. And so now that you've got this Big Ten alliance out there, you might start to see more universities, burr their back up and say, we're not kowtowing to what Trump is doing. There's strength in numbers. And it makes the University of Cincinnati look so bad right now. It really does, because they were the first to the table to kiss the ring of Donald Trump. I shouldn't even say kiss the ring. I'm going to go a step farther and say kiss the butt of Donald Trump and roll back DEI policies. And I'm just so disappointed because, this is in our city.
I mean, it's not surprising. The same university that allows like crazy right wingers to go and bullhorn and yell at students and call them slurs or whatever under the guise of free speech. So it's not surprising that they did that. It's just very irritating.
I would agree with you on that, Evan.
It's I saw that. I was like, that scans. What I mean? But it was like, but why? Like, why do we have to be that embarrassing with it? And again, just push back a little bit. Lose an email. Play dumb. Miss some calls. Like, it's not that hard. They've been doing it every single stage. Taking it further, why are you confirming any of Trump's cabinet picks? Like, when Obama got elected, McConnell was like, all right, look, y'all, we're going to make him a one-term president. We're going to fight back and push back against everything he does, even if it's in the best interest of the country, like raise the minimum wage or debt ceiling. We're going to stop all that. Can you at least keep half of that energy for an actual fascist who's actually running wild? And, especially with the now, Supreme Court 9-0. The Supreme Court even voted unanimously for something. You're like, whatever. So why are we even voting for Supreme Court appointments? And he stacked that court and still going against it. Like, it's crazy. Like, push back, for the love of God. I'm asking anyone with any modicum of power to do something to push back and not just go, well, here's what it is. Let's wait. Let's go fundraise on it and let's get Cory Booker out there for 2028. Right now, people are gonna die if you don't do anything. Like, stop with the whole pearl clutching. Sorry.
I love it. Kamika writes, I don't think UC kiss anything. They don't have the endowments to dismiss their federal funding.
I think that's just a poor excuse. You either believe in what you're doing or you don't. I get that they don't have that. They're not working with the same amounts of money. But I said this on the last podcast. You either believe in justice or you don't. And sometimes when you believe in justice, that means you got to take a hit. You got to be willing to sacrifice and stand on what you believe in, even if that means taking some short-term pain. And look, more people might have come to UC's defense and even to their rescue if they had stood up to this. I think UC did way more damage to their reputation. I think people are going to be less inclined now to go there, less inclined to support. If I'm an alumni who was for DEI, you ain't getting my annual donation, to the university anymore. So much for your lack of endowments. You're going to have even less. So you better hope that federal funding comes through for you. So I'm not feeling sorry for UC or saying, oh, they don't have the endowments. Either you stand for justice or you don't. It's that simple.
Well, since we're on the subject, and I know Phil brings it up from time to time, Anthony just wrote, too bad these high-powered law firms didn't do the same. But you know what? There are some that are winning court cases.
Actually, I was gonna say something about that.
Oh, no, I was just setting the stage for you, bro.
Yeah, well, you said it. First of all, what I like about this whole thing is it kind of shames the universities that caved in early on, and to show what Kevin's point about it isn't the endowment. Columbia University caved in. Remember, they wanted, and they were getting less money. They only had $400 million on the table. Harvard has billions on the table, but they caved in. And now I wonder, I'm sure they've got buyer's remorse right now. I'm sure they feel very embarrassed they did that. And as this person said, the same with these law firms. Oh, the first one, Paul Weiss, I think, they cut a deal with Trump. But now suddenly we have about, I don't know how many, quite a large number of law firms similarly banding together, as well as the American Bar Association, and they're saying no, we're suing this guy. We're suing this guy because for First Amendment reasons. I tell you, if you want to see a vision or an image of Donald Trump 50 years about 50 years ago, his predecessor in terms of his tactics is Joe McCarthy. It's the same tactics. And I would recommend you can get it on YouTube, a great documentary. It's called Point of Order. And all it is, it's just clips from these hearings, McCarthy hearings. And you're watching a bully, you're watching a lying bully in action, and you're listening to people willing to stand up to him. And I just recommend that because I don't see much difference between what he did. In fact, what he did was less serious because he didn't have as much power as a senator as the president does.
Yeah.
Nathan, there are a lot of good counter comments. A lot of UC defenders. It sounds like in the chat. Maybe give them a few minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, Columbia's endowment is, I don't know what it is, but it's it's billions. So that it's hard to argue. Oh, we're too poor.
Was there any particular comment that stood out to you, Kevin? I'm looking through it now.
Well, I don't know. I assume, I see David in the comments. It sounds like he's making some questions or making some statements.
Harvard is deeply connected. This is foolish talk. Well, one thing I'll say about Harvard that I've just learned in the last couple of days is they do have a deep endowment. I mean, in the tunes of I think $3 billion I read. Now, most of that is tied up with prior commitments in terms of what they can actually spend the money on. From what I remember reading and or hearing, I can't remember where I got it from. I think they've got I don't know. I want to say $1 billion of their endowment is they can actually do whatever they want to do with it. So
at least.
Yeah, I mean, if the point is that Harvard is different.
Oh, you're talking about they have $1 billion.
They've got $1 billion they can do some flexibility with. I could be off with that number, but I think I'm on point. But don't hold me to it. Definitely fact check it. But there is a significant amount of money into the hundreds of millions at the very least that they can do what they want. And that is a distinction, Dave, if you're trying to say about UC. Perhaps they don't have the same endowment that Harvard does, and that does hamper them. But I think I agree with most of the panel here. I just feel like UC gave in too early, way too early.
And by the way, Nathan was right about something that I was confessed wrong about last week, because he said that on the Harvard thing, not only are they cutting off the money, but Trump is trying to use the IRS. And you said this, and I wasn't aware at the time. Trump is actually trying to use the IRS to take away their tax exempt, which is probably a more difficult, tougher punishment than even that funding. But it also shows the extent. Now, think about this. The IRS, I believe, statutorily is independent, from the president. And yet Trump is trying to basically tell whatever lackey, I forget who put in there, to punish Harvard, take away their tax exempt status. And being tax exempt, as you all know, has nothing to do with whether you're woke or DI or anything.
I just want to.
Can I make a quick point real quick, Kevin?
Yeah, go ahead.
Real
Sorry.
Quick. It was 2 points, really. So back to what you were saying, I had something I wanted to share with you. Phil was just making a point. Kevin, you threw me off, bro.
I'm sorry, bro. I'm sorry.
Phil, what? I got a great point. It was great flow.
I was talking about the law. I talked about the law firms, the ones who, just like Columbia, caved in, and I talked about the
there it is.
The IRS.
Yeah, once again, Trump.
You're getting older, Nathan, so that's normal. I understand it. Your age, if I was your age,
bro. You don't want to be this age, but yeah, on the IRS thing, once again, Trump is he potentially broke another law. Because, after Richard Nixon tried to use the IRS, Congress and Jimmy Carter signed it. Yeah. I can't recall the exact name of the law, but it's illegal for the U.S. president to try to direct or even indirectly try to get the IRS to go after enemies or do any kind of investigation. So he just opened up a whole other can of worm. Not to mention the fact that through Doge, they have gutted the IRS. So I would even wonder if they could even put up a proper defense if it goes through litigation, with a little bit of irony there, right? So that's just not going to happen whatsoever. And then there was one other thing I was going to say, but I can't remember, and I'm going to give it to Kevin. Go ahead, Kev.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to respond again because I'm reading some of these comments in here as we're going along, and there's some good ones. There's some good points of debate in here. Kamiki, and if I mispronounce your name, I apologize. Had a comment in here. She said, "Oh man." Oh, she said, I would love to see people put their money where their mouths are. I'm currently struggling hard to keep a child in college at UC, and I need that campus to keep federal funding. And so I understand and have compassion for that, and certainly don't mean any disrespect by, what I'm about to say. But this is exactly the position that Donald Trump, tries to put people in. And I say to this myself is, what good is it to keep your kid in an institution where they're being taught, or where the government is trying to control what they can be taught? Or maybe even if Trump gets his way, your kid might not have even been allowed to even be admitted into UC in the first place. These are the types of bad, compromising choices that Trump is trying to put us into, which is the same position that frustrates me with these Republicans who are afraid of pushing back or resisting Donald Trump against things that they know are wrong because they're afraid of being primaried. And my point is what good are you? What good is the position that you hold if you can't stand on what you believe, speak out on you're just there. You're no good anyway. So you might as well get primaried and be out of the place. What good is it to have your child in an institution that disrespects Black history, that they make uncomfortable for them, or don't put things in place where they can be as successful as possible? This is sort of the wrong-headed, backward thinking that Donald Trump tries to force you into by bullying you into these positions. And Nathan, I need to apologize to you because when I recognize I'm wrong on a point, I always try to circle back around. And this
What you need to do more often.
I say. Well, no, like sometimes you got to really think about, and this is why, like, I respect this format and this program, is like sometimes you really got to think about some of the things that are said and examine your own thought. And as I've started to argue more vigorously against the things that Trump is doing, it does make me go back, like when we were having the conversation about Sanctuary City. And you and I were going back and forth about, and I think I made the statement, well, the city can still do this anyway. And you were like, nah, it's important that, you project that and stand on that and do that. And I feel where you were coming from.
You come around.
Because I feel where you were coming from on that, because David had kind of said something too in the comments about not knowing about what UC is doing, and that, you can still be doing things. You don't just have to broadcast it. And while that is true, and that was the point of view that I was arguing with you on the Sanctuary City, I've come around to the fact that sometimes, no, doing it underground and doing it behind the scenes when somebody is trying to force you underground is not the way to do it. You got to be able to stand up and stand proudly and say, this is who we are and this is what we stand for. And sometimes there's some cost associated with that. So I apologize to you, bro. It took me some weeks to come around, but I get where you were coming from on that point, because
as I knew you would.
If I can throw something else in here along those lines. Did you guys read that the Naval Academy has been forced to take 300 and so plus books out of their library?
Yeah. I read it.
Because they're including that book by Maya Angelou, The Caged Bird or something. I mean, it's like, what? I mean, what are you doing? This is what Nazis did. This is what they do in Russia. And you're taking books off the shelf. I mean, it's just horrible.
It's hard to believe. But let me share a thought with you, because when I read this, and I also saw the senator go down to El Salvador and was able to get, this is a Democrat senator from Maryland, I can't recall the man's name, Van Hollen.
Chris Van Hollen.
We do need to remember his name. Props to him. I appreciate that. But when I saw that in conjunction with this story we're talking about right now, about these colleges coming together and essentially forming a NATO to deal with Donald Trump, I thought, you know what? I'm starting to see Donald Trump, and I like this idea better than just we're on our way to fascism and it's a dictatorship on the horizon. There's nothing we can do. I like the idea I'm about to share with you a lot better, which is I'm starting to see Donald Trump as sort of like I'm gonna use a video game reference, like a final boss, that if we can defeat, will strengthen our game, right? Like his attacks on our system is either gonna break the system or make us stronger. Because now what I think people understand is that there are gaps in the Constitution, there's gaps in what we call democracy, because these people have investigated those gaps and are invading them. But if we can beat this final boss and maybe fascism proof our country on various levels, then perhaps this can push us on a better trajectory. Am I just being overly
If you have to blame it specifically amongst the it's not just Trump we're fighting. We're fighting like broadly, like, you know, pro-capitalist, fascist, conservative, right-wing, white supremacist agenda. Trump is the face of.
Yeah, see, I disagree with that. I think it otherwise it's just the same politics we've had for 20 years or 30 years. The point that I think needs to be made is no, this is different. This isn't just, oh, I'm
right.
pro death
I'm
penalty or
saying that, Phil.
I'm
Yeah,
anti-abortion.
yeah, I agree.
This is different. This is evil.
I agree.
This is evil, and this is why Republicans like Liz Cheney and others who are probably fit into what Evan said, that kind of right wing type of thought. Okay, but Republicans and conservatives need to stand up and say, "Hey, I'm conservative. I'm this, but this is
their
different.
values overwhelmingly
This is
align with
different."
it. Like the thing is, like all the conservatives, like the
Well,
issue
I mean,
with
if you
Trump is not
believe that,
even
then you're saying this time. If you believe that, you're saying then you say this time is no different than 5 or 10 years ago. That's or 10 years ago before.
this
Trump.
time is
That's what you're
different in
saying.
terms of that we demonstrated, or at least Democrats demonstrated, they were going to let him do whatever and not really hold him accountable. So now he's running
No,
more
I'm not
wild
talking
now.
about that. I'm talking about the level of wrong. You're saying essentially what he's doing now is no different than what, say, Republicans
Project
did 10 years
2025
ago
has
or
been a
11 years
Republican
ago, and I
agenda
don't
for
agree with
30
that.
years. Nothing of that is new. None of that.
If you believe, you're basically saying this is no different time than we've had in the last 30
I mean, it's
years. And I
different.
strongly
It's more
disagree with
masked
that.
off. But Project 2025 is the Heritage
It's much
Foundation,
more.
which is literally
It's a threat that goes well beyond any disagreement you have with right wing Republicans or something.
I
This
think
is
you guys. I think
different.
you guys are having. I think you guys are making the same point,
Right.
but just coming from it from. I think what Evan is trying to say, which I don't completely not subscribe to, is that a lot of this is what's been lurking underneath some of the conservative politics in this country, and even some of the Democratic politics for a long time. What is different is Donald Trump. Is you actually have someone in the White House now who has the power and the inclination and the ability to, and the lack of shame, quite frankly, to execute a lot of these things. So to his point, you know, Project 2025 has been in the works for quite some time. But what you had is you did have some, you had some conservative stopgaps, right? They would only go so far, right? In terms of some of the things that they would do.
Well, I don't even like to say conservative because a lot of things he's done, as we've talked about, law and order and this stuff, it's really not even conservative. In fact, you've probably seen there, people are showing clips all over. I know you guys aren't great Ronald Reagan fans, but he was 100% free trade. He said tariffs are the worst thing. And so it's more than just
the party
more
has moved to the
conservatism.
right. I mean, like George H.W. called trickle down economics voodoo economics. Like, you know, Nixon gave us the
True, John.
EPA.
Oh,
They
true.
gave us
I
pro
agree, but that's
immigration.
true.
Yeah, they've
Donald
moved to the
Trump.
right
I
more
agree.
aggressively for sure. But this isn't new. This has been their agenda for at least the last 20, 25 years. Like most of these things we're talking about. The thing is, they were never in a position to really implement it full-on force from the federal level. These are things the Republicans want. So again, even if you got rid of Trump, it would arguably be worse if you had a more effective person in there who could do this with a little bit more poise. You know, that's broadly the issue that people have with Trump is that not his policies, just his approach, the way he does it, sloppy and ineffectual. If you got other Republicans in there,
It's his policies. It's his policies too. When you incite a violent attack on the Capitol, I consider that a policy.
right? Yeah, so that's true. And again, plenty of conservative side that was the deal breaker for them, so they still bent the knee. You know, So again, I'm on the bond that, like, Trump is the issue. The reason why he's able to be successful because he has been a figurehead and a face for so long. So he has that name recognition, is that branding is very built in. You couldn't inherently replace him with another Republican to have that level of success in terms of support, but they'd be more effectual. They get more things done. And again, it'd be like, what I'm saying is you chop off the head, 3 wouldn't rise and replace it. Like, it's the broader Republican agenda. And they're not going to stop.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
Trump
I would
so I don't want to always frame the argument being, we got to stop Trump. We have to stop the right-wing agenda.
Well, I would disagree with that. There's a story in the Washington Post today, actually, about a number of conservative. They're more commentators than they are politicians. So Lisa Murkowski did, as Nathan put, did speak up. But these are people who are kind of conservative. Eric Erickson, a bunch of other people. I don't even know these, but there was a story in the Post today about how they are saying, hey, look, you were told by a court. To even Ben Shapiro, who I have no respect for, but even he said this the other day. You're told by a court to bring that guy back. And it doesn't matter if you don't think the court should do that or they don't have the power to do it. They are telling you to do it, and you're not doing it. So even people who might be traditional, whatever you want, Republican conservatives, are at least to some degree saying,
but not enough, Bill. And here's what I will say is you are of a certain type of conservative that Trump has eliminated from the Republican Party. Like, and when I say eliminated, not that you've gone anywhere politically, but he's essentially run you out in terms of.
Well, in the Congress,
in terms of having any real level of influence in the party, and he's replaced you with a whole bunch of MAGA sycophants and people who think along the lines kind of what Evan is saying, and so and those that he hasn't run out, he's cowed, like Lisa Murkowski and some of these others. You're not seeing a ton of Republicans standing up and saying what you're saying, even as he's defying the Supreme Court. Why? Because either they're scared or they're gone, right? And what difference does it make if a Phil Hemlich is on the sidelines shouting it? You ain't in Congress, right? And there's nothing that you can do. And so from that standpoint, what Evan,
and if I was, I would have been primary.
And so that's where I'm saying, like, those who are on the last, like the Republicans who are on that think like you, who are in Congress, who could sort of be like that last line of defense, they may have to go the route of Liz Cheney and say, look, if I'm interested in saving this country in America, I can't save my seat and save the country at the same time. And saving the country is more important at this moment in time than saving my seat. But they are cowards. They don't have the wherewithal to do that. And they'll see
representatives on either side of the aisle are cowards who are not really meeting this moment because they're more concerned about maintaining their comfort level. Like, they don't think to meaningfully change. They still want to get their little cozy job. They still want to get all their donations for being the resistance to Trump. They don't want things meaningfully to change, which is why they're not pushing back more aggressively, which is why they're not willing to lose their seats. I have immense amounts of respect for people like Democrats like Cory Bush, and Jamal Bowman, who were primaried as Democrats by AIPAC because they wouldn't bend the knee to Israel. Most elected representatives are going to mostly concerned about maintaining their own self-interest. That's what was kind of hard for me when I was running to distinguish myself, saying I'm not trying to be a career politician. I don't want to do this. I hate bureaucracy. I just wanted to maybe have someone like us having a say in these kind of decisions. I'm sorry to see Phil go. I get what he's pointing out. Like, what Trump is doing is definitely new and uncharted territory, in terms of him flagrantly breaking the law. But broadly, it's still the Republican agenda, like, broadly speaking, And there hasn't been a sensible Republican since pre-Obama, because McConnell got rid of most of all those and built this big tent party of, Tea Partiers and ardent, just right-wing, wackos that they've normalized the party being that. I think most, moderate, conservatives are like long gone in the party. They don't really have many of those. And even if you do have them, again, they're towing the line. So what use are them? I'm tired of this. Democrats have been trying to reach out this mythical never Trumper to emerge and suddenly save them. Are not coming. They're not coming because even the voter is still voting amongst their own class interests, where it's like, yeah, Trump's a loudmouth, he's an asshole, blah, blah, but, you know, I'm okay, so whatever. So it's never going to happen. So that's why Kamala ran a crazy, awful campaign by running to the right, according to a demographic who were never going to rock with her. Any number Trumper in 2024 is already a number Trumper. So I don't know who she was courting by canvassing with Liz Cheney or blah, blah. Like, why would you vote for someone Republican light when you could just vote for the Republican? Like, I didn't get that at all, you know? So again, I don't know where our initial point is because I may not be older as y'all, but I'm ADD as hell. So the point being is like, yeah, I don't. You started with the final boss comment, you know, and we can't put it all on Trump. Has these the be alls if he's the, you know, the only thing terrible with the rottenness of the Republican Party. Like Phil was, but not other conservatives. Like, no, all of them are complicit in this. So we have to reject it completely. My thing is we can't just stop the here and now. We have to put the safeguards to make sure it doesn't happen again. Like, one of the things with Biden getting elected is like people stop fighting. They're, oh, cool, we got Biden there. All right, cool, we can lay back. No, we need to put safeguards in place to make sure that doesn't happen again. And that never happened, like the entire time, you know? So Trump saw, oh, y'all ain't gonna do nothing? All right, cool, I'm gonna run it again. I'm gonna be more flagrant about it because you're not gonna do anything, you know? So again, what I've been begging the entire time, I need people to do something, anything, please, God, resist. Do something, file a lawsuit, don't vote for that, lose an email, something, but just stand around going, hoping for somebody to stand up or waiting around for the next election cycle is not going to do it because people are going to suffer in the meantime.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% completely, Evan, about the Democrats not putting up safeguards for Trump, because you know what they were counting on? They were counting on those indictments. They were counting on the justice system to be the thing that was going to eliminate him from the picture. And that was a bad bet. Obviously, you know, hindsight is 2020, but that's the reason why they took a breath, why they thought for sure. And again, any reasonable thinking person, like, you can't fault them, because in a logical environment, anybody who would have perpetuated an attack on the Capitol, that is like a career. That's a career ender. That's O.J. Simpson level. You know, that's O.J. Simpson
that's
level.
More bodies. January 6th got more bodies than OJ. Like, that's a big deal. Like, yeah, seriously. Like, yeah, that's the problem.
You reasonably shouldn't be able to come back from that. And then
nothing was done meaningfully to prevent that from happening. Like, you know,
right.
So again, this is where we are now. That's why, like, you know, I've been arguing the last few months with a lot of liberals who are mad at leftists and third-party voters and non-voters for not participating. And when I point out, like, 25% of Biden voters in 2020 abstained in 2024, specifically because of the handling of the, you know, ongoing genocide in Gaza. So it's not just leftists and you know, Green Party people who abstain. Actual vote blue, no matter who people abstain because the party moved right, as it's always been doing consistently. Like, and they, you know, even if you're not to the left, is like as a Bernie Sanders type, who I'm still frustrated with right now for different reasons, you got to recognize the amount of momentum he can capitalize on and advocating for policies that are working class policies. That's how I was able to do and canvass in Republican areas, because I was talking about working class issues that affect working class people. And even if you are a Trumper, what I'm talking about is going to affect you too. You care about affordable housing, you care about healthcare, you care about, you know, living in a walkable city, you care about having a grocery store, things like that. If they were run on that, they could get things done, but they don't ever, because they're not really interested in meaningful change. Like, they take their marching orders from the same people who fund both sides, which is why we're never going to get, you know, a public healthcare option, which is why we're not going to get more green energy jobs, why we're not going to get a higher minimum wage, you know, things they had an opportunity to do, which they just didn't do. So now they want people to believe that, oh, this time they're going to do it. And it's like Lucy with the football. Like, it's not going to happen. So I'm encouraging people to focus more on mutual aid work and community building and things like that, because it's been very clear that no one's coming to save us. We have to save ourselves.
But bro, I see us arguing a whole lot in the future if you come back on. I love it too. But I can't disagree with a lot of what you said though. I think you're on point, especially like what you said about them not putting in safeguards when Biden was in office. I think that's a really strong point. But again, I haven't researched to see if there was any attempts and if those attempts were thwarted in terms of just the numbers. But good stuff. Good stuff. Usually at the end of the show, Evan, I just give people a minute or so to reflect if there was anything that was said during the show, or in particular, any exceptions or points or anything you want to make. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
So way back when I mentioned that I want Democrats to fight back the way that McConnell did when Obama was elected. And David Whitehead said, well, that didn't work out for McConnell. I think it worked out amazingly for McConnell. Like, look how much gains Republicans have done since he's there. Those Supreme Court appointments, that was McConnell. Like, I think he did very well in terms of his side. I'm a big advocate of very much knowing and respecting your enemies. He got it done. So I want someone on the Democratic side to push back just aggressively and not let things happen. And that's all I can advocate for. In the meantime, is use the individual, mutual aid works, get out in your communities, meet your neighbors, things like that are way more impactful and more important, in my opinion, than electoral politics.
Kevin, anything in your mind, bro?
No, man. I mean, I think it was another good discussion. Great comments in the chat. I mean, I wish we could have got to every point that was in there, particularly when we're talking about the universities. But a lot of good points that people brought up in the chat. So if you get a chance to go back, if you're watching this on later or you doubling back, make sure you get a chance to go back and review those and look at those, because there's some good thoughts and commentary in there. Nah, man, just everybody have a great weekend, and looking forward to doing it again next week.
Yeah. Thanks to all the crew members. Phil, you're out there. Uncle Phil, appreciate you. Evan, it's been a pleasure, man. I'm definitely got to have you come back.
I appreciate
broadcast. Absolutely, man. We live stream on Tuesdays and Fridays at 1 p.m. So next show is April 22nd, Tuesday, April 22nd. And we'll pick up the conversation then. Until then, have a great weekend.
You as well. Y'all take care.